get to it. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our discussion panel on community-led initiatives for protecting Melbourne's environment. I would also like to thank Lankert, who kindly supported this online event. My name is Sofia, and I'm a community engagement and research volunteer with the Yarra Riverkeeper Association. And today I have the pleasure of moderating this event. So before we start with our panel discussion, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land. The Yarra Riverkeeper Association acknowledges that the lands and waterways of the Yarra catchment and beyond are the unceded territories of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. We pay respect to their ancestors who cared for country since time began, and to all Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung community, to all the Kulin Nation, to all traditional owners who continue to speak and care for their country. We acknowledge that the river now called the Yarra has always been known as the Birrarung by its custodians. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists for today's session. So to start with, we have Richard Squires from Buttman Original, dedicated to raising awareness about cigarette butt litter and plastic pollution through an inclusive and colorful campaign that seeks to educate and inspire behavior change throughout the community. Our next panelist is Candace Colaco, joining us from the Little Litter Project, which educates people about the impacts of littering, equips the community with tools to better manage waste, and hosts cleanup events. Our third panelist, who hopefully will be able to join soon, is Sally Walker from the Friends of Scotchman's Creek and Valley Reserve, which is based in the city of Monash and organizes a range of activities to engage the community and care for the Scotchman's Creek corridor and the adjacent Valley Reserve. And finally, we have Ben Golding from Friends of Andrew Reserve, which has been set up by local community members who have been, as they say, using and enjoying this little bit of wilderness in the middle of the city for a number of years. They set up this group with the intention of giving something back to the bush. So the way this panel will be structured is a little different to what you might be used to, as each panelist will be interviewing one another. If you join our Women's Leadership in Water Management and Environmental Protection webinar, you already know how this works. So please feel free to ask any questions throughout the event through the Q&A box that you have at the bottom of your screen. And if time permits, at the very end of the event, we will go through some of those questions. Any unanswered questions will be answered through a follow-up email later on, so don't worry if we don't get the chance to get to your question. Also, this event will be recorded and will remain in the Yarra Riverkeeper Association's YouTube channel to be accessed anytime. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Ben, who will be doing the first interview of the evening to Richard.
Sure.
So, yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Richard. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Ben. You as well.
So how did you get started with this particular quest that you're on to rid the world of cigarette butts?
There's a fair origin story to it. The main part was I work in South Yarra, and there's a lot of construction going on. There's a lot of high-rise apartment buildings getting built all the way up the street, and I noticed there was sort of an influx of people that didn't sort of live in the area coming to work and then leaving. And it was like a dump. Our street, Claremont Street, just became an absolute dump site, from sort of building materials to lunches were just left everywhere, and cigarette butts were everywhere. And then I sort of looked closely, and the drains, the stormwater drains, there's one at every 10, 20 metres on the street, and then the Yarra River's only about 100 metres from here, and it's downhill. And I thought, I'm going to learn a bit about this, and I started to learn a bit about it, and I was horrified. So I started collecting the cigarette butts and started to sort of collect them.
Nice. So what happens when the cigarette butts enter the ecosystem?
So there's a couple of the two main things with a cigarette butt is that once once the tobacco has been smoked, a lot of the chemicals that pass through the filter stay in the filter. I think there's 3,000 chemicals, and there's about 50 known carcinogens that end up getting stored into the butt. And the cigarette butt, despite what people think, is actually made of plastic. So it's a tightly woven cellulose acetate material, which is plastic. So a lot of smokers don't realise that they're littering plastic. So there's two things. There's the plastic that degrades down into smaller bits of plastic and enters the food chain through animals in rivers in the water. But then you've got the poisoning of the actual water that happens with the chemicals that come through.
Right. How long do the butts last in the ecosystem before they break down? I mean, plastic, of course, never really completely breaks down, but, as a whole object.
Yeah, so you're right. It'll always be plastic, so it's not going anywhere. But I think it's around 10 years, depending on how much sun, wind, air they're exposed to. They do sort of the ones that you see around the city get stepped on, they get crunched up, the paper that surrounds them comes off, and the fibres, they're like little hairs. They sort of splay out and get mixed up with sort of dirt particles and things. So they sort of break down quicker than if, a cigarette butt was left sort of in the grass. It's sort of intact, but yeah, around 10 years.
Right. So I've always seen this as really a problem to do with behavioural change. And I remember years ago, I was coming back from an afternoon coffee in the city and was walking past Market Street, and there was a building there that was having a fire drill, and there were a whole bunch of people milling around on the streets. And I saw this young woman, and she pulled out a cigarette packet, opened it up and pulled out a cigarette and dropped it on the ground. And she just reached down completely unconsciously and picked it up and put it in her mouth. And I was really struck by how there is nothing else on the face of the planet that she would do that with. And it's like it brought home the fact that there's a real disconnect between that act of smoking and what that person would do in the sort of rest of their life. I've known smokers who would never throw a piece of rubbish on the ground, and yet they throw the butt away unthinkingly. How can you sort of challenge that kind of, perverse behaviour in a way?
Yeah, so I approach it with compassion. The people that smoke cigarettes are addicted to nicotine.
Yeah.
So there's a key issue there, and it's addiction. They're addicted to a really powerful product that sort of has them, it kind of controls their behaviour. So I see the problem as a human problem that I can approach with compassion. I never enter a conversation with a smoker if I personally feel angry or frustrated about their action. So I need to forgive them for doing what they do under the premise that they know not what they do. Because if they knew what they did, or if they were connected with what they were doing, they probably wouldn't do it or couldn't do it. So most people deep down, I believe, are really nice.
Yes.
And I don't achieve that 100% of the time. That's one of my ideals. But when I want to address behaviour change is much more, I guess, appropriate or much more, you can get much more traction with someone if they like you. So I start a conversation, I try and find some common ground. I never come at them with the anger that I actually feel. I feel a lot of anger. I feel like it's a personal attack. If someone litters or someone does something wrong by the environment while they're around me. But I'm not going to get any traction with a human being that I come the wrong way at. And I know that if someone came the wrong way at me about one of my behaviours, I'd probably dig my heels in and do it even more just to spite them.
Of course, that's just human nature. Get your hackles up and dig your heels in.
It's very difficult. So it's a great question, Ben, and it's the behaviour change element, and it's a much bigger question. You could take this to any bit of plastic rubbish that gets littered. Is it the government's responsibility to actually address the packaging, and the products that we're allowed to buy, under the premise that perhaps we're not going to change our behaviour. So let's make all of the things that we eat our food in and cigarettes and stuff turn into fish food or turn into bird food or biodegrade completely into something. That doesn't address any of the behaviour change. When you are addressing the behaviour change, it's incredibly complex because each person is incredibly complex and different. But the main thing that you brought up there, which I really like, was the unconsciousness of it. And the addiction means that the addiction drives the person to do this behaviour. They do the behaviour, their mind's somewhere else, they're disconnected, they may have no sense of place, they may have never been bushwalking, who knows? Or they may have something else on their mind, so they do this thing. And I can't in good conscience believe that they're doing it on purpose. Surely there's a part of society that do it on purpose, and like the 0.01% of people that are actually destructive. But I believe that the rest of the people out there need to be educated in that it's plastic rubbish. It's toxic plastic rubbish for a start. It's not paper.
Yeah. How do you intend to sort of expand this and push it out further into the community?
So I see. So if I was to address the entire issue of tobacco product waste worldwide, I'd have a nervous breakdown immediately. And so I see success in every cigarette butt collected. I have to believe that every little move that I make and every little bit of influence that I can ripple out into the community matters. Now, aside from that aside, I want to start an advertising campaign. I want to actually raise funds to get it on television. I want an awareness campaign run, probably through the bushfires that happen, so the fire risk element. I want to have fun. So I think that, and this is not a knock on anyone whatsoever, but I think that the environmental scene and the environmental movement is always incredibly politically correct. It's always incredibly inclusive and fun. It's a very light sort of image. I kind of want to come at it. I want to come at it with like a comic book flair, a bit of street, a bit of street cred, a bit of toughness to it. So you won't see sort of images of gum trees and things like that in my campaign. It'll be like more street art, hip hop, attitude, kind of like a ninja kicking the cigarette butt, out of the air and into a bin, that kind of thing, sort of a bit of force applied.
How do you think that's going to play with those workmen that are in South Yarra, that are on the building sites?
Yeah, I don't know. So I need to, one of the parts of my research, I suppose I've got all this in my head, is to target the campaign at the people that are doing it. Because if we sort of write a campaign, or we get a campaign up and we go, let's just homogenise this across the whole community, why is that going to be effective? And why not sort of target and put an arrowhead? If I was to do that, I would do it on the construction industry, and I would do it on the trades and construction industry. And the culture in that industry, from the top down, you can get some construction companies that are actually quite good, and the building managers show strong leadership. Others, you'll see the building manager walking around smoking and flicking their cigarette butt on the ground. So with your question around how will the street art, hip hop kind of edgy feel come in with a sort of, let's say, muscle bound, tradie who sort of doesn't care too much for that style of thing, I would definitely change my approach on every person I meet. And one of my key indicators, or one of my key sort of things, is to get on Triple M. If I can get onto Triple M, I feel like I can reach. I used to do builders labouring myself, so I feel like I can have a conversation. I might have to bring a builder in with me to maybe drop my voice a few decibels.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I wish you every success. It sounds like a really valuable strategy and a great project to be involved in. Good on you.
Oh, thanks very much, Ben. I appreciate your questions and good luck with your answers.
Thank you. And back to you, I suppose, Sally.
Okay. Well, took a bit long to get here, but I'm here now. So my name is Sally Walker. I'm from the Friends of Scotchman's Creek and Valley Reserve. And that's in Mount Waverley in the city of Monash, eastern suburbs of Melbourne. And we're just a local environment group. And we do the things that local environment groups that look after the local creek tend to do.
Yeah.
Now, what do you want to say?
So, Sally, I think it's my job to ask you a few questions.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so when were you guys founded?
The Friends of Scotchman's Creek and Valley Reserve was founded in 2001. It was a combination of the Friends of Scotchman's Creek, which, believe it or not, was brought together to save willow trees along the banks of Scotchman's Creek, and a previous group called the Friends of Valley Reserve that had been started some years prior to look after a very special bit of bushland in the city of Monash. This is an area that, for the most part, was never disturbed. It was never turned into a market garden. And there were some lovely bits of remnant vegetation. And a particular gentleman called Alf Salkin was very keen to preserve this area. He propagated plants, they planted the plants in the area. Eventually they got the council sort of involved and said, look, you've got to look after this place. Anyway, the two groups came together due to sort of aging populations and declining membership a bit. And it's been going along pretty well since then. We still have an aging population, as you can see from my white hair, but never mind. We're still pretty active, most of us.
So I've seen that you've been able to plant thousands of trees along this stretch of
Yes.
river. I want to talk to you about how the grant application process and how it comes about that you find out of a grant, and what's the process there with grant application?
Melbourne Water runs a grant program. It's actually just changed slightly recently, but it's a grant program. You can apply for a grant and you can get money to buy plants, and generally it's on council land. So it's not private land, that's more land care. So we work obviously with the city of Monash, and they organise the plants and we pay them, but then we do the planting, and we have big groups come along. So we do National Tree Day, which is once a year at the end of July, and we've been planting 8,000 plants on National Tree Day for a few years now. We have two other planting sites. We put in 2,000 plants in each site, and we get local businesses to come along and give us a hand. And that's very good because local businesses are keen to put something back into the environment, and it's good PR for them. But they come along, they have a good morning's work, healthy exercise, putting plants in the ground. If you've ever used a Hamilton planter, you'll know it doesn't always go in the ground very easily. So that works well. And so we've got in well over 150,000 plants have been put in. Do we have to be an incorporated association to apply for grants? Yes, or else you can be sponsored, but generally speaking, you do, and we are. You don't have to be registered for tax purposes, but you do have to be incorporated.
So when you're going to have a planting day,
yep,
what's your avenue to recruitment for volunteers there? How does that work? How do you attract them?
Okay, National Tree Day itself has a big website, and you get your site put up on the website, and people can apply to the website to register on the spot. But we also put notices up in local notice boards. We've got various notice boards along the creek, and we put a notice put a notice in there saying that this planting day is coming up, and these are the directions, where to go, how to get started, etc. So we don't have any trouble. In fact, this year, of course, was a washout. The poor old council staff did all our planting for us. But last year, we actually had about 250 people came along on National Tree Day, and it was actually too many. But normally, about 100 to 120 people we'd get. With the other two, they are just for the business that is coming to give us a hand on that particular occasion. So, we don't have to advertise that. We would have planting days of our own. That's for the Friends group, for the members of the Friends group. But again, they'd be advertised on the local notice boards. We occasionally get people coming along for that.
And I've got two more questions.
Yes.
The first one is, what has been the greatest moment in your involvement in the Friends of Scotchman's Creek? Describe what happened in that moment. What was your greatest moment?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that question. I suppose almost we do Water Watch. I don't know if anybody's heard of Water Watch, but this is where you monitor the health of your local creek. We do that once a month, and we sample for the little bugs that live in the creek. And we also have school groups, and we explain this to the school groups, and we will get the creatures out and put them in trays so that they can find them. Well, one time we had a kitty litter tray with quite a lot of weed in it. And the kids were looking at the tray and were looking to see what was there. And suddenly they all started squealing like mad because they'd found a yabby that was that long in a kitty litter tray. That was amazing.
That's awesome. So having an impact on the generation that's coming through.
That's right. Yeah. So we do. In fact, my husband tonight is out with some cubs.
I noticed that he's on the board as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's on the committee also.
On the committee, yeah. So this is the last one. How would you determine, or how would you measure success? What would be, what determines the success of this group? Do you have a finished product in mind, or?
Oh, look, a Friends group never has a finished product in mind. It's ongoing, always ongoing, to get more plants in, to try and educate the public so that there's less litter. That's always a big problem. To keep an eye on the general environment so that we're lobbying people so we don't get inappropriate developments next to the creek, and just trying to impart our knowledge to the next generation and just keep the members going.
So success is sort of a many branches coming out.
That's right.
Well, thanks so much, Sally, for answering my questions. I hope they were okay.
Oh, yes, of course.
Cheers.
All right. Now I guess it's my turn to be the interviewee. Hi, Candace. How are you?
Hi, nice to meet you, Sally. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Okay, I do have some questions for you. So what prompted your group to get started?
So basically, I'm an environmental science student, or well, I graduated from a Bachelor in Science majoring in environmental science.
Okay.
And yeah, I'd be driving down the freeway every day, taking the ring road, and I noticed that there was a lot of rubbish on my way back from uni every day.
Yep.
And I would pay attention to it, but I'd always be like, oh, I'm sure the council would be doing something about it. I'm sure Vic Roads or someone would be doing something about it. So I always just kept driving, never really worried about it.
Yep.
A couple of months passed and I noticed that the same rubbish that I saw was still accumulating in that same area, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. And I was like, I can't believe nothing has been done about this. Yeah. So I actually called up my local council and spoke to them on the phone and was like, I've noticed that there's a whole lot of rubbish along the freeway. I was just wondering if you could get a team to come down and clean it up, or if something would be done about it. And they were like, it's actually not our problem. It's come from Vic Roads because of the roadworks and the construction going on. So you're going to have to call Vic Roads. And so I was like, okay, that's no problem. So I called Vic Roads and I spoke to them and they're like, it's actually not our problem. It's your local council's problem. So I was just pretty much getting handballed back and forth between Vic Roads and my local council. And
yes.
I was like, nothing's being done. And so I noticed that, especially when I scroll through my social media, when I look through my Instagram and my Facebook, I noticed that there was no awareness being raised about issues such as plastic pollution and managing our waste and the effects of plastic pollution on our planet. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start up my own little initiative, my own little project, and start talking about the effects of it. And hopefully by raising awareness, other people could be seeing this issue as well and be seeing this rubbish on the side of the road. Because heaps of people are taking the same road every day. Like, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking the exact same thing that I'm.
Yes. But look, they're so used to it. They just drive along and they don't see
Exactly. And these are big pieces of styrofoam. Mind you, styrofoam doesn't even degrade, doesn't even break down over like years and years and years. So it kind of like, it started to hit my heart. And I was just like, okay, so I started up a project just called the Little Litter Project. And since I was doing environmental science, it was awesome to have a little initiative also to help me alongside when it came to getting myself out there, networking, teaching myself and learning more about such issues when it comes to sustainability and the environment and reducing our waste. So it was awesome. And now it's kind of been 2 years. I started up in 2018 and it's kind of grown into this project, which I'm super passionate about and have met so many people through. I've been recognised for a couple of council awards. I've featured on podcasts in the local paper. And so it's kind of become a bit of a big deal. But no, I definitely have enjoyed it. And that's basically how it started up.
All right. So how many people do you have in your group and how do you recruit volunteers?
So for me, social media is a big thing, especially at my age. And a lot of my friends are on social media. So I tried to keep my Little Litter Project group basically just by posting a lot and keeping it consistent. So my post, I constantly try to keep tips and tricks, even through COVID when we weren't even doing cleanups or anything like that. I would try to gauge more people through how to recycle, reducing your waste, and little daily things they could do in their lifestyle to pretty much, try to make a change. And so that's how I've, and it's basically through networking, through meeting more people. I've become close again with primary school friends and old uni friends just from this common ground or from the environment and for the love for environment and wanting to maintain and protect it. So it's basically been all through social media, which is awesome. But it's nice to slowly, after COVID, face to face, be able to meet a lot of those people again.
Yep. Okay. And what changes have you seen in the amount of litter over time, if any?
So I feel that's actually a good question. I feel like prior to COVID, we were kind of getting on track when it came to our litter reduction, like reducing our waste and reducing our litter. I noticed that a lot of people would be taking their own coffee cups into cafes, and a lot of people would be reusing their pasta bottle or their pasta sauce bottles. And there would be small ways which we were, I didn't see as much litter, but then COVID hit and there was this massive wave of plastic pollution and single-use items, and everyone was getting takeaway packaging and everyone was wearing disposable masks and disposable gloves. And I just feel like this wave all of a sudden hit us. And when I started to go on my walks, I noticed that there was just gloves all on the floor, there was disposable masks all over the floor. I'd be driving past the reserves and I feel like there would be so much takeaway packaging just dumped up the side. So I feel like it's been kind of like a roller coaster. But definitely now coming out of lockdown, hopefully that we can get back into our habits and get back into those ways that we were getting into prior to this COVID and all of this single-use waste.
I have noticed walking recently that one of the big problems actually is that the litter bins are filling up so quickly and they're not being emptied often enough. So even if people want to put their disposable cup into
I've been going for a couple of picnics. I've been going for a couple of picnics with my friends, and I've noticed that the parks have been so full because of the weather that everyone's been using the bins, and the bins have just been overfilled, full of rubbish. So it's good to see people putting it in the bin, but at the same time, it's been overfilled now.
Okay. Have you seen any changes in the composition of litter over time? Well, actually, you have through this year, haven't you?
Yeah.
So how do you dispose of the litter you collect?
So with my cleanups, it just depends on the kind of, if it's a wet day or if it's a dry day, if it's a sunny day. Generally, if I do cleanups and most of the waste is quite contaminated and dirty, I just have to dispose it off into general waste because there's nothing really you can do about it. And some of it's been sitting there for so long and it's so dirty and full of water or mud, so you can't really recycle it. Whereas if it's quite a dry cleanup, and I do tend to pick up a lot of recyclable items like plastic bottles or those meat tray containers or metal cans, I like to sort through my rubbish and try to recycle as much as possible, try to give it a second life. Just because I feel bad throwing this whole amount of rubbish into the general waste. But yeah, I try to do my part where possible and try to recycle as much as possible. But yeah, sometimes it's tough because the waste can be so dirty and so contaminated.
I do understand, because we do Clean Up Australia Day and some of the stuff has been there for ages.
Yeah, I remember one time I found a can and the can was from like 2014 or something like that. And I was like, oh my goodness, this can has been sitting here for like 6 years.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Do you have litter traps on the rivers or creeks near where you work or pick up your litter? And do
Litter
they
traps.
work? Litter traps. Creeks collect litter and they wash down the creek, and Melbourne Water puts in a litter trap, and then they come around and they empty the litter trap out periodically.
Empty it out. Yeah.
Do you have any around where you do your cleanups? And do they work?
My council, unfortunately my council, we're not on top of it when it comes to our environmental area. So we do not have any of these litter traps. I've seen quite a few along the Yarra. Whenever I go for walks along the Yarra, them collecting all the plastic bottles and all the things that are floating on top of the Yarra. But unfortunately down my side, we haven't yet got any litter traps. But hopefully soon, because that would be awesome, especially clogging up our waterways, which is the most important. When it comes to
stormwater systems, you've got to teach people what they do.
I know, and it all tends to accumulate over there, and I don't think people realize how bad the effects of it accumulating in our waterways is.
Okay, all right, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Sally. I really appreciate it.
That's all right. Now it's your turn, I think.
I think the ball's being handed over to me.
Yep.
All right, that's awesome. So I think I'm interviewing Ben next.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Ben. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Candace.
I was reading a little bit into Friends of Andrews Reserve. I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about Friends of Andrews Reserve and where exactly it's located, and why did you begin this initiative?
I began this initiative with a friend of mine, Tamara Carpenter, and we had been talking about how much we really enjoyed the little patch of bushland that we have, near the river, near where we live. And I don't know, we just put our heads together and thought, well, why don't we do something to try and make it better, to collect the litter, do something about the weeds, and just get out and enjoy the bushland and make it better for everyone, make a contribution that was going to give back to the community. And that was how we sort of got things going, and sort of press ganged a few of our friends into coming and joining us, and they've been fantastic. Some of them have a great deal of plant knowledge and bush regeneration knowledge, and we've been making good use of that and sort of gradually growing the group, bringing more people in. That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like it always starts off with your closest friends or people you know, and then it slowly expands from that. So I should just say that Andrews Reserve is in Kew. It runs between the Collins Bridge, which is at the end of Gipps Street in Abbotsford, down to Walmer Street, which is runs between Kew and Richmond near the IKEA that's there. And it's the bottom most segment of Yarrabend Park. It's the most downstream section. So it's quite sort of important as far as being a sort of buffer zone that protects the rest of Yarrabend Park from things coming up the river, or from that end of things. Not that things tend to go upriver that often, but from weeds and incursions from there. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. It's definitely nice to know that. I'll definitely, next time I'm in that area,
I will
You
pay
do.
attention to it. Yeah. So how do you currently engage your community around this initiative and its goals?
Well, we use social media a bit. We have an Instagram account that we post things out, and, you know, do engage with people via Yarra Riverkeeper. We have a lot of contact with Parks Victoria, and in fact, the Parks Victoria website has just been absolutely fantastic for getting people in. We put our activities up there, and that lets people join them, know where to come and what to bring. And that's been just a great way to get people involved. And it's brought people in from all over the place. We had a meeting just the other week, and there was someone there from Keilor and someone from Bentley who had been just itching to get out from their lockdown and go and do something in the bush and make a contribution. And seeing people come from so far away, it was just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm located around Keilor, so I can say that it's always nice to drive out that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And another question for you is, what challenges have you faced when it comes to trying to engage the community?
Actually, one of the problems that we're really trying to moderate is to not grow the group too quickly, because if we bring in lots and lots of new people, they need to be trained. And if we're spending all of our time doing training, then we're not actually doing any work to get things moving. So it's a bit of a balance between wanting to bring more people in so that we're more effective, but also bringing them in at a pace that allows us to still keep doing the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
That's been far and away the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine, definitely, because you don't want an overwhelming amount of people, and having to train them, and
well, I was reminded of exactly that with the last speaker saying that, you know, she had 250 people roll up on tree planting day, and it becomes virtually unmanageable. You can't plant anything because everyone's running around with shovels and spades and Hamilton planters.
I know, it's always so exciting when you get that amount of people, but at the same time, you have to definitely be prepared for something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So lastly, the last question I have for you would be, what was the most rewarding moment, definitely along this journey when it comes to friends?
It's been interacting with the different people and seeing how they've kind of been able to build on the knowledge that we've passed on to them and really become huge contributing factors, influences in the work that we do. You know, they learn to recognise weeds, learn to use the techniques to take them out, look after the environment, you know, look at things like how to manage erosion. We have a lot of issues with erosion in the reserve. The Yarra Boulevard runs alongside it, and the water collects in the gutter, runs down to the sink point, goes underneath the footpath, and then just empties straight into the bushland. And so when there's heavy rain, we wind up with huge erosion channels forming, and that's just a vector for weeds to spread right through the reserve. So we've been doing things like hammering in some stakes into those to slow the water flow down and just, you know, back things up and let those channels fill in naturally. That's been really good. I think the real triumph is seeing more animals in the area, and that's been partially influenced by COVID because there's been so many fewer people around, though, well, less cars around. The parks have been crawling with people trying to get out and get some exercise during lockdown. But we've had kangaroos in the reserve, and that to me is amazing because really we're 4 kilometres as the crow flies to the city. Blue-tongued lizards, goshawks, there's a native rat that we've found living in one of the tree hollows. It's just a very rich environment for really quite a small patch of land that's so densely surrounded by habitat, by people.
No, that's awesome. That's definitely, I feel like that would be the most rewarding thing, seeing those animals coming out and about and seeing them actually in person, after so long.
So it really emphasises the health of the ecosystem that's there and the fact that it's able to support so many different things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's awesome. It's definitely so interesting to learn about Friends of Andrews Reserve. And thank you so much, Ben. It's definitely inspiring for someone like me who's just started up this initiative when it comes to community engagement. So yeah, I take everything that I can.
Sounds like you're doing great work. It's really good.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, that was great. I would really like to thank each of our panelists for sharing their stories and your insights with all of us. It's been truly really inspiring to see how the determination of just one person can create such significant changes in whatever it is that you do. So thank you very much for joining us. We understand that this event was supposed to end at 7:40. So if people have to leave, no problem. Remember, this session is being recorded. But for those of us who can stay, we'll go through some of the questions. Probably not all of them, because there are coming a lot of them. So any unanswered question, remember that will be answered through a follow-up email later on. So first of all, people have been asking about our panelists' social media. So we put the links on the chat box that is at the bottom of your screen. Please do check them out. Also in the event web page, you can find links to the social media for panelists. So we'll go through some of the questions. So this one goes for Ben. What solutions have you found to managing training?
Well, there's two aspects to really the training that we need to do with the people that come along to work with us. And one is just using the techniques that we need to use to remove different types of weed. A lot of the different types of weed have very different strategies that you need to get involved in. Some can just be, you cut the stump off and then paint the stump with glyphosate. Others need to be removed completely, like Madeira vine, because even a leaf left behind will take root again. And there are other things like Chilean needlegrass that require enormous care in removal of the seed heads, because the seeds go everywhere. They get caught in your clothing and they're very long-lived in the environment. And then there's the identification of the plants themselves, which is, it's a lifelong course of training, and you need to have people that can help you with learning how to do the identification as well as just knowing what the plants are. So there's two threads that we're challenged with bringing people up to speed.
Excellent, thank you very much. So next question from Millie Berg. Hi Sally, how do you manage safety on planting days?
How do we manage safety? Well, it's not just us, it's a whole crew of the Monash Council bush crew that come along as well. So there are lots and lots of people there, and we don't have any shovels. All we have for digging holes are specialized digging tools called Hamilton planters. And they're not the sort of thing that you can readily cut somebody with, not unless you really are trying very hard and put it down on top of somebody's fingers. So look, occupational health and safety is not too much of a problem, but the other aspect is that for public plantings, we always choose a site that is reasonably safe. I mean, you just can't do this sort of work on a steep bank. It's just not safe, so you don't do it on a steep bank. And as I say, we have lots of council staff around that we are wandering around from members of the Friends group, and we can assist people, show them how to do things, make sure they're doing things properly, engage the small children in picking up the empty tubes that the plants came in and making very long snakes out of them. That keeps them out of mischief. And just keeping an eye on people, basically. So really, we have not had any issues. We've not had any problems over the years.
Thank you for that, Sally. Next question, Carrie and Erica O'Connor and Turner. So love listening to you, Richard. Love your approach. Is this work completely voluntary, or do you apply for funding grants to produce the artwork?
Yeah, so I went, I did a GoFundMe campaign. Well, I've done 2 of them. I got about $3,000 altogether. and I was able to purchase, I was able to sort of register my business, Buttman Planet Defence, and I was able to purchase these. These are pocket ashtrays, so they're made out of recycled plastic, and you can open them up and you can put your cigarette butt in there, totally lit, and then you shut it and the cigarette extinguishes itself. I got some t-shirts made up, but yes, it's totally volunteer. It's a passion. I absolutely want this to succeed. I'll do anything to make it succeed. And but yeah, no, it's voluntary, and that's one of my most asked questions actually when I'm out there collecting is, do you get paid for this? Why are you doing this? You know, and I just want a clean place for my kids to grow up in, really.
That is amazing. Thank you, Richard. And last but not least, Candace, what would be one of your best tips in reducing plastic pollution in daily life?
Oh, daily life. So when it comes to daily life, I feel like it's small things, whether it be I know this has become such a big thing because now Safeway and Coles have stopped pretty much plastic bags. But yeah, just carrying even just produce bags. I know I've invested in a couple of produce bags, which is your like silicone wraps instead of Glad wrap, saving your pasta jars and trying to head to like your local bulk food stores, which is a great way to reduce your plastic waste, especially the plastic packaging that all of our pasta and peas and everything comes in, as well as just trying to recycle, trying to give our items a second life. So a lot of councils don't have their soft plastic bins yet. So trying to collect our soft plastic, like our bread bags and our pea bags, and going and dropping them off at the local Woolies. And yeah, just small little daily things, our coffee cups, taking your own keep cup where possible, straws, it makes such a difference to keep like a metal fork and a straw in your bag at times. You just reduce the amount of straws you're using. And yeah, just small little things like that. I feel like before you leave the house, if you just remember these couple of things, it will definitely go a long way when it comes to reducing your plastic pollution or your single waste where possible.
Thank you so much, Candace. So for all our panelists, make sure to check the comments in the Zoom webinar chat because you've been receiving a lot of compliments. So please check them out. And I guess we'll wrap it up here because we're running out of time. So thank you again to everyone who attended the webinar and to our awesome panelists for sharing their time with us. It was great. Remember, this session was recorded, so everyone will be able to access it anytime later on. If you want to feel inspired later on again, go check it out. And that's it. So have a great night, everyone, and see you next time.
Thank you very much indeed.
Bye.
For this opportunity. Bye-bye.
That was great.